Greetings and welcome. My name is Komate, Public Information Officer with San Francisco Public Works. Thank you for joining us today for the Better Market Street Virtual Open House public meeting. Please note this meeting will be recorded. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly go over how this afternoon's meeting will be structured. I will introduce the Better Market Street project team, followed by a presentation by our project manager. And finally, we'll end the session with a Q&A and public comment. For those joining us today via Zoom, welcome. Please note at the bottom of your screen, there is a raise hand tab or icon. When you are ready to ask a question or make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon and you will be noted in our queue. We will go down the queue in the order of raised hands for you to make your public comment. Also noted, as noted on the bottom of the slide that is on the screen, you may also email your question or comment to bettermarketstreet@sfdpw.org. You may also call the 1669 number if you need audio only for the public meeting. Please note the webinar ID that is listed on the screen, 971-5977-54. Excuse me, 971-5977-7545. For those calling us and joining us via phone only, to raise your hand via phone, please press *9 when you're ready to raise your hand. And now please let me introduce the project team. Joining us tonight from San Francisco Public Works, we have Christina Olea, Project Manager. We have Flora Law, Deputy Project Manager. Ophelia Lau, Project Engineer. Nick Ansel, Landscape Architect. Janet Kioy, Landscape Architect. And joining us from SFMTA, we have Peter Gabancho, Project Manager. Britt Tanner, Senior Engineer. Mariana McGuire, SFMTA Communications Lead. Aziza Jackson, Public Relations Assistant. Manfred Wong, Sewer Project Manager. And Ben Caldwell from SF Planning. We are also honored today in having us join us today, Public Works Acting Director Alric de Graffenried and SFMTA Director Jeffrey Tumlin. We will now turn it over to Alric to share a few welcoming remarks.
Great. And thank you, Koma. And I also want to say thank you for everyone that's either on the phone or on the webinar today. This has been as a long road into getting to the point as we're at right now. We have am taking your feedback over the course of years, and we are all trying to figure out this project. But as reality is, and the economic impacts of this past year with COVID and shelter in place have had a severe impact on the city more broadly and as a nation as well. And it's also had an impact on this project. We've had to relook some of the realities as associated with this project, trying to weigh and the features of the project and try to find a way and to move it forward. Frankly, we have received funding from the federal government in the form of build grants that that we as a city are obligated to start and the construction associated with this project in the spring of next year. So all of these things are impacting some of the choices that have been made and some more recently. At the same time, we also want to recognize and try and appreciate the impacts this project will have on and the businesses and the residents that are along Market Street. So we've been trying to find a way to limit the negative impact that some of the construction would have on these businesses, and as many of which are just now beginning to open back up. And so in trying to find ways to do things like and to preserve the sidewalk that's there. So and the spaces are allowed to be used as part of the shared spaces program is a concern that we've been and trying to balance, uh, as along with the interests of and the bicyclists, the pedestrians, the buses, the cabs, uh, and the business vehicles as well. So I just want to close and very quickly and just say, this is going to be uh, as a phased project. So we're going to be and reserving the right or reserving the as ability to come back and look at certain things like a protected bikeway and things like that as a possibility in the future. And that's something that that I'm sure as my colleagues at the MTA are going to be and discussing and for later and for during as the presentations and during and the question and answer. So with that said, I will not ever go on as about that ever too much more. And I will introduce as my colleague, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Thank you, Director DeGraffenreid. I'm Jeff Tumlin with the SFMTA, and as you all know, Market Street is the most important street in San Francisco. It's the most important street for our transit operations. It has the highest volumes of pedestrians. It's the street that the entire citywide bikeway network funnels its way into, and it connects to critical destinations at either end. It's also symbolically the heart of San Francisco. It serves a critical civic function and deserves to be treated with that level of importance, just as envisioned by Jasper O'Farrell about 160 years ago. That said, it's also a complicated street and our funding is limited. So while we want to maintain a grand vision for Market Street, we know that the Better Market Street project needs to be phased. And as Director DeGraffenreid already said, we're phasing this project by starting only from 5th to 8th and only in the middle part of the street in order to deal with some critical infrastructure issues that our federal grant is allowing us to solve for. And I think something that has not been understood is that we do not need to make a decision today about what the final configuration is with regard to a sidewalk level bikeway on those blocks or in any of the other blocks. That said, we are deeply concerned here at the SFMTA that as planned, the Better Market Street project is grossly inadequate for bicyclists. The sidewalk level bikeway was designed to be only 5 to 8 feet wide. And at 5 feet, cyclists have to ride single file. At 8 feet, they can ride side by side, but an additional cyclist can't pass them. Given the volumes of cyclists that we saw back in January, we need a better facility in order to accommodate the future of San Francisco, a future of San Francisco that would see the incredible success that we've had during COVID with our slow street network and on corridors like JFK in Golden Gate Park. If we're successful in phases 4 and 5 of the slow street network and actually creating a citywide safe network for people on scooters and skateboards and bikes and wheelchairs and other forms of micromobility, we should be able to double or triple or quadruple the level of cyclists that we saw back in January. A 5-foot cycleway doesn't accommodate that. It wouldn't have even accommodated half of the volume that we saw back in January. We need to think better and bigger and more ambitious. And to do so, we need to get a little creative, including thinking about how could we accommodate 11-foot to 13-foot wide outside travel lane that is not only welcoming to children, to seniors carrying groceries, to real San Franciscans on bicycles, but also at the same time does accommodate the occasional delivery truck or slow moving taxi cab or paratransit vehicle pulling up to the curb. We need to think about how can we do a project that doesn't cost $1 billion and wouldn't be complete until 2035. How can we use the incredible success of our January Quick Build project and get the ideas of Better Market Street built sooner, faster, and within our available resources? And so we're eager to hear from all of you about what kind of experimentation can we do now, both on the 5th to 8th section as well as in other stretches? Can we design the street to physically force right turns so that we don't have to rely on enforcement? Can we design the physical infrastructure of the street so that The delivery trucks and taxis can't go more than 12 miles an hour, which is not only about bike speed, but also the speed at which the traffic lights are synchronized in both directions. So we're eager to hear from all of you about how we can move faster, stay within our actual fiscal reality, which is going to continue to be dire for many years. And how can we build to a vision of San Francisco that is beyond what we dreamt was possible in 2015? And learn from not only the last couple of months of experiments, but the next several months of experiments. With that, I think Britt Tanner from the Department of Public Works will describe the project, and then we'll hear some comments from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Again, before we begin, we want to remind participants that if you have a question, you may raise your hand to be put in our queue. Or you may also submit a Q&A through the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. Now on your screen, you'll see other options to submit your Q&A. You may email bettermarketstreet@sfdpw.org, or you may use the raise hand feature. If you're joining us today with the call-in number, to raise your hand, please press *9. And now we will turn it over to Christina, our project manager, who will begin our presentation.
Thank you, Koma. My name is Christina Olea. I'm the Better Market Street project manager, and I'm with San Francisco Public Works. I have a 15-minute presentation that I will go through tonight to help describe some difficult changes that we've had to make to our Better Market Street project. Better Market Street is a joint effort between 5 city departments. The San Francisco Public Works is the lead department. Also involved are the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, Planning Department, and the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. And we work closely with the Mayor's Office on Disability and the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. Better Market Street started 10 years ago in 2010. And since the project started, we have always had the same goals of improving place, mobility, including safety and accessibility, and to support the economic development of the corridor. Our goals include making a street that is designed to reduce the number of traffic collisions and injuries, to improve the performance and reliability of public transportation, to upgrade and install new infrastructure, and to create an active sidewalk and vibrant street that identifies Market as the city's preeminent ceremonial street. In January of 2020, we implemented Quick Build, or as it's also known, Car-Free Market Street. Almost immediately, we saw up to 12% reduction in Muni travel time, and we saw an increase of 25% in the number of people bicycling along the corridor up until shelter-in-place was ordered. This growth in Market Street bicycle volumes made it obvious to us that a 5 to 8 foot bikeway would be too narrow and would not provide the necessary capacity from day one. Right after Market Street went car-free, or 6 weeks after, the city shut down because of COVID-19, and our businesses were closed. We had to shelter in place, stay at home, and really the city changed quite a bit. The pandemic impacted the economy of the city, but at Market Street especially, as you can see in some of these photos, with businesses boarded up throughout the corridor. This made us look at the project and reevaluate the design to try to match project costs with available funding. And also, even more importantly, to minimize the construction impacts to local businesses and to support their recovery in the next year or several years. We also saw Muni reduced to core service plan, which also changed the way our city moves around. And we want to prepare and support the city's recovery as we move forward. To support our local businesses, we know that we must minimize the impacts of construction. So you'll notice in this new design, we're keeping the existing curb line as much as possible. We can actually keep it in about 75% of the blocks between 5th and 8th Street. And we will only need to narrow the sidewalk where we have center boarding islands and for one new loading zone. We will be upgrading and constructing all new curb ramps that meet our latest accessibility standards, but we'll have limited sidewalk replacement, meaning that we won't replace all of the brick sidewalk now. The replacement will be focused around the corners where we're building the new curb ramps. We've also decided to defer replacement of the Path of Gold poles and traction-powered duct bank, since they still have about 10 to 15 years of their useful life. So moving into the design changes themselves, this is a rendering at Plaza that helps describe the new Better Market Street proposal. Transit will be moving to the center Muni-only lanes. All transit will, not just the F-line. I mean, the F-line would remain in the center lanes, but all of the buses would also be moved to the center lane. This means that curbside stops will be removed, and it will eliminate conflicts between buses and bicycles. Bicycles will stay in the curb lane, which will now be shared with taxis, delivery vehicles, and paratransit. The center boarding islands will be wider and longer, similar to the 2019 proposal, but these center boarding islands will meet all of our current accessibility standards. They'll all have the mini-high platforms for people in wheelchairs to board the F-line trains. And all of the crossings onto the center boarding islands will be at signalized crossings. You can see in this rendering, the mid-block crosswalk between Plaza and 1155 Market, which is the building that houses both Lighthouse for the Blind and the Mayor's Office on Disability. All of the traffic signals will be upgraded. You can see the traffic signals for the mid-block crossing in this rendering. Because the curb line is maintained, we'll be able to keep the existing roadway level loading zones, except for one spot between 5th and 8th Streets, which is along this block that's shown in the rendering. Currently, there's a loading zone on the south side of Market to the west of 1155 Market. Because of the new center boarding island that's there, we'll be shifting the loading zone to the east, just past the traffic signal. So you can see it in the corner of the rendering there. That's the only loading zone that will be relocated. All of the other loading zones will remain. You can see in this rendering as well, the BART Muni elevator near the curb, which would remain in its location for now. Let's talk a little bit in more detail about the shared curb lane. As I mentioned, the shared curb lane would be for people bicycling or using other micro-mobility devices like scooters. Taxis, delivery vehicles, and paratransit would also use this lane. We first presented these design changes in September, and early on, some of the initial feedback that we received from our key stakeholders was concern that the bike lane was not separated from the Muni-only lane, and wanting to ensure that speeds in the curb lane were low and that we calm traffic. So since our first presentation, we have added a painted buffer. It's a 2-foot buffer between the Muni-only lane and the shared curb lane. Within that buffer, there will be a raised curb. It's a mountable raised curb with gaps for drainage, but that raised curb would discourage anyone in the curb lane from moving into the Muni-only lanes and would discourage Muni drivers from entering into the shared curb lane. And then the third element that we've added is a speed table This is a wider, flatter speed hump, or similar to a speed hump, but wider and flatter. And so this would help reduce speeds in the curb lane. It also would discourage drivers from using Market Street for through traffic, or discourage anyone from driving into Market Street. As Director Tumlin mentioned earlier, we're looking for ways to reinforce Market Street as a bicycle priority corridor without having to have a labor-intensive enforcement team at every intersection. So the speed tables work in the curb lane to reduce speeds and calm traffic, and the raised curb helps keep drivers from trying to go around the speed tables. We're showing right now a double sharrow in the curb lane. This is just a sketch. The striping is just a concept, and we're still working out the details of what the striping would look like. So we welcome any feedback on the sharrows and wanting to highlight this curb lane as a bicycle priority space. A couple other things that I'd like to note is that, as I mentioned earlier, the curb line, we're keeping the existing curb line, meaning that we won't have to narrow the sidewalk in 75% of these 3 blocks. Because we're keeping the curb line and deferring the Path of Gold pole replacement, we won't be replacing the brick sidewalk today or as part of this first construction project, but we do intend to come back and replace the Path of Gold poles and replace the sidewalk at a later date. The other important point to note is that given car-free Market Street and the new transit service plan, our projection is that we would see 75% fewer vehicles in the curb lane. So personally, as a cyclist, I'm really looking forward to not having to leapfrog buses in the curb lane. But not just that, there will be an overall reduction in vehicles using that curb lane. This shows you a close-up of the raised curb. This is similar to Rosa Parks in Portland. And then we have a picture of a speed table along Hudson Avenue here in San Francisco. And then on the bottom half is just a sample between 7th and 8th Street. We are planning to have 2 speed tables in each direction, the 2-foot buffer between vehicle lanes with the raised curb. And then this rendering is from the perspective of a person walking along the corridor. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be constructing all new curb ramps, limited sidewalk replacement, but we will be replacing all of the bricks at the corners and any broken bricks or gaps in between the bricks throughout the blocks. And the center boarding islands will be expanded to meet our accessibility guidelines. This is a comparison of our 2019 to our 2020 design. This is the typical cross section. In the 2019 design, which is on the left, we were widening the sidewalk by 2 feet, but then repurposing the first 12 feet of the sidewalk, 4 feet for a buffer, 8 foot for the bike lane, and then narrowing the sidewalk to 25 feet for people walking or rolling along the sidewalk. There were still 2 lanes in each direction, the 11-foot curb lane and a 12-foot Muni-only lane with transit in both lanes. The 2020 design removes the sidewalk level bikeway, which means the sidewalk remains at 35 feet for people walking or rolling only. Bicycles would use the shared curb lane along with taxis, delivery vehicles, and paratransit. The curb lane is 11 feet wide with a 2-foot buffer between vehicle lanes and then the 12-foot Muni-only lane, which would include the F-line streetcar and all other Muni buses. This plan view of our 2019 design is meant to show how often the bikeway narrowed. It narrowed wherever we had BART Muni entrances, the BART portals, wherever we had the sidewalk level loading zones, and where we had Muni curbside transit stops. So again, in our typical block between 7th and 8th, you can see that we have portals not just at each end of the block, but also mid-block. And then we had loading zones on both sides of the street and curbside stops on both sides of the street. So it left us with a very little segment in each direction that was actually 8 feet wide. I'm going to shift now into our funding plan and our project costs. The shaded area in gray covers all of the expenses to date, what we spent in planning and design. We used local funds to cover all of our environmental review and design, including general fund, Octavia land sales, impact fees, and MTA's Prop A Go bond, as well as Prop K, and a little bit of money from BART and PUC also for design. The redesign effort is estimated to cost $7 million. So we're showing that in its own column, a new column, 7 million for the redesign. Our budget for phase 1 construction is 121 million. You can see that the largest funding source is MTA's Proposition A general obligation bond, but we also have a little over 18 million in federal funds. We received 15 million from the BUILD program and 3.4 million from a One Bay Area grant. We have 12 million in the Prop K funding as well. And PUC will be funding their portion of sewer and water costs using ratepayer funding. This is our comparison of the 2019 and 2020 designs. You can see that in 2019, the sidewalk level bikeway, the full reconstruction of the sidewalks, and all of the utility relocation came to 191 million. That includes the cost of the construction, contingency, the escalation, soft costs, including construction management, and transit support was 191 million. Looking at our new shared curb lane design in 2020, our estimate is that the construction contract would be 64.8 million, almost 65 million. And a portion of the work, the block along Market Street from McAllister to Charles J. Brenham, will be built in phase 2, which is the F loop. So our estimate for that is almost $10 million. When you add in contingency and escalation, as well as soft costs, plus the redesign effort, you get 128 million. So our projected cost savings for this segment is 63 million. But when you project that over the other 4 to 5 segments, we get a much larger savings for Better Market Street. And we have heard a lot of questions about why is Market Street still so expensive, given the changes in the design. And the costs are broken down here by trade or by the scope of work. So you can see that the focus of this first construction contract will be the roadway, and a lot of the work will be maintenance or state of good repair work. At the top of the list is replacing the streetcar tracks and the traction power system that feeds the F-line and the trolley buses. We are repaving the roadway and reconstructing the trackway, so that adds in cost. We're leaving the Path of Gold poles, but replacing the overhead wires. From the PUC, we have water, as well as auxiliary water supply system upgrades. And a few lines down, we have sewer as well. There's landscape that comes in around $3 million, full traffic signal upgrade for the intersections and crossings between 5th and 8th. And then some traffic routing, structural, All of the bark grates will be replaced, and you can see site assessment and remediation for our excavation. So all of this work is what is driving the cost of the project. The safety improvements and beautification are split in roadway and landscape, but you can see that those two categories come to just over $9 million. And a portion of that, as I mentioned, is for the street repaving and maintenance work. Our project schedule, we hit some big milestones in September. We received our NEPA clearance and we obligated our federal funds. Our virtual open house, oh, I forgot to update the slide. We just extended our virtual open house to November 30th. So you'll have an extra couple of weeks to view our presentation materials on our website. And today is the last of our online meetings, but we are adding a project survey to the website, so you can answer the survey between now and November 30th. We'll also have a list of frequently asked questions, and our fact sheet is available on our website in not just English, but 6 other languages as well. Lighthouse for the Blind and the Mayor's Office on Disability will be hosting a public meeting on November 12th, this Thursday, to also make sure that we get input from the blind and low vision community, the disability community as well. You can see in the project schedule as well, we are scheduled to start construction in early 2021. Our schedule is to advertise a construction contract in February. And we expect to break ground in summer of 2021. And right now, our estimate is that construction will take about 2 years to complete. At the same time, we'll be designing phase 2, or the F loop, and we expect construction of the F loop to begin by 2024. So in closing, I just wanted to talk about what's next after 5th to 8th Street. You can see here the construction limits, or the project limits, for phase 2 of the F loop. It's Market Street between McAllister and Charles J. Brenham, as well as the new track along McAllister and Charles J. Brenham. This F loop allows us to run the streetcars along the loop to service the waterfront where service is needed the most, without reducing service to the Castro. Most likely the operations will be, like every other streetcar would go back and service the waterfront, while the other train would continue on to Castro. We know that west of 8th Street, we are still planning to implement the hub area design, which has only 1 lane in each direction for Muni only, and then a widening of the sidewalk, or some larger islands to take up the extra roadway space, and to provide a wider protected bike lane. East of 5th Street, the design hasn't been decided yet. There's still a lot of uncertainty, and we're waiting to hear more details about the transportation recovery plan and what transit operations will look like east of 5th Street. So right now we are narrowing our discussion to 5th to 8th Street, because this is what is funded and what we know we will be building next. With that, I just wanted to leave you with our Better Market Street website, bettermarketstreetsf.org. And then if you have any other questions about the project or any media inquiries, you can reach out to Coma or myself. Our emails are shown here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Christina. Again, we will now move into our public comment section. If you have a question or comment, you may select the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. We currently have 13 participants with their hands raised. You will see a list in the chat box indicating the order of our raised hands. We also have some Q&As that we will read out loud in between the public comments from the raised hand section. I will read the first 5 names of people and then alert you when you are able to speak. So please unmute your microphone and make your public comments. The first 5 individuals we have ready for public comments are Paul, Matt, Lauren, Bruce, and Stacy. Again, we will go through Q&As that are written in the Q&A chat box in between public comments. So Paul, please prepare your public comment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Valdez, and I'm a person who typically has a daily bike commute down Market Street for the last decade. Great to see you, Christina. Thank you for your presentation. As a community member, it's been a great pleasure working along with you and others on this project over the years. And please know that the comments that I will humbly share today have underlying high regard and respect toward all of the hard work you and your team have exhibited. Better Market Street has been a project near and dear to my heart. Over the last 10 years, I energetically attended many design workshops, community meetings, focus groups on offering my ideas on making our main thoroughfare more safe and livable for all users of Market Street. I contributed my thoughts and experiences more specifically to safety and user tested both the raised bikeway pilot and the delineation surfaces for the original design for the sidewalk level bikeway. And most notably, I passionately spoke out at City Hall in support of the comprehensive quick build car-free design approved a year ago. As a person biking, introducing the sidewalk level bikeways removal with these proposed changes is like a punch in the gut, and I'm truly, truly disappointed. The decision to scale back the essential safety and enjoyability features is non-visionary and entirely backward. This new design will not encourage more people, families, or future generations of San Franciscans or visitors who may choose biking as a safe, healthier, and sustainable way to move about Market. This proposed change does not encourage this. It will not happen. I didn't advocate for these revised elements, which didn't include anything better, lacked appropriate community outreach, and it lacks safety features for Market Street's future. And I just want to go on record and say that I cannot believe we are talking about sharrows on Market Street as a design element. They may work on the wiggle, but Market Street is no wiggle. It's our city's main artery. It's just not the same. As we all know, green paint doesn't work and does not magically protect and save the lives of people biking. A sidewalk level design I felt was fine. Users will just adjust and get used to the flow no matter what the size is. Bigger the better, but look at what other European cities are doing. So here's my solution. If we're going to take the lane, create a better or protected bike infrastructure. And you know what? Remove or ban taxis from Market Street altogether. That could be easily figured out. Deliveries better be enforced at certain times to avoid conflict with people biking during commute times. I experienced most of my conflict with taxis and delivery trucks. So please reconsider the bike design safety features and please continue to reach out to the community for better input. Perhaps offer more opportunities for additional outreach, create breakout rooms through Zoom and so forth. So it would be sad if this project that I devoted 10 years of my time toward turns into the bummer Market Street project. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to collaborating further so we can get this right.
Thank you for your comment, Paul. We will now move on to Matt. Matt, please prepare your comment Please prepare to make your comment.
Hi, this is Matt. I am one of the organizers of People Protected. I've owned a business on Market for 6 years. I've lived within 3 blocks of Market Street for over 10 years. Better Market Street is the first civic effort I got involved in San Francisco 10 years ago. And I now help organize a group of over 500 people who advocate for transit, walking, and biking safety and priority in our city. I am deeply disturbed by what is now known as worse Market Street. Yes, it will actually be worse for people's safety because taxis, trucks, and private cars always drive faster on fresh, smooth pavement. This is dangerous to people walking, taking transit, and biking. Market Street is a high injury corridor. 5th Street is the most deadly intersection on that whole street. I wrote in here compassion because I know you guys are working hard. I understand budget constraints. I was a small business owner on Market Street. I used to have to do lots of deliveries there. And I know how hard it has been for staff to operate during COVID. However, the fact that you've proposed a plan that literally doubles down on the failed Shero disturbs me to the core. A sidewalk level protected lane will be needed for our most vulnerable users. But until then, they will have to use this shared lane. People like my mom, who moved here and I introduced to using a bicycle for transportation, now uses Market Street to get from her house to her grandkids' house by bicycle. The unaddressed problem is taxis, trucks, and illegal cars using Market Street as a cut through. Speed tables will not stop this. I even just looked at your presentation. You put the speed tables next to the boarding islands. Anybody on here that tells you about the dangerous situation on Market Street will tell you taxis are speeding mid-block. It's not at the narrowing at the boarding island. I don't think this team has actually thought about the users of this street. And this is why we planned for 10 years. Just imagine biking alone at night in the dark and a taxi driver revving down your neck. We need turn barriers every 2 blocks on this street. I'm talking physical barriers that if you crash a car into it, it stops you dead cold. Now, we need taxi drivers to think of Market as a cul-de-sac, something you only access for drop-offs. I would recommend automated bollards, like the ones you find in Europe. They can be lowered by emergency vehicles or for city parades or in situations when the F breaks down and Muni needs to use the curb lane. I want to see better solutions from this team. The safety of people walking and biking and even crossing from the transit islands has been completely ignored from this project. Thanks for your time, and I will continue to work to actually make this better Market Street.
Thank you, Matt, for your comments. We will now go to a Q&A question. This is an anonymous submitted question. Without the raised cycleway, how will Market Street you're proposing be any safer for cyclists than what is currently in existence?
So the proposed design is focused around a few key safety improvements. One is reducing the number of vehicles that would be using the curb lane. We've already restricted all private vehicles, including Uber and Lyft. Transit vehicles are moving to the center lane. So the only vehicles left are taxis, delivery vehicles, and paratransit, which are, just 25% of the existing traffic volumes. And I think it was Paul who mentioned delivery times. And that's an important point that I know I didn't mention in my presentation, but delivery vehicles are prohibited from making deliveries in the peak direction during peak hours. So inbound in the morning and outbound in the afternoon. So bicycles will get more space than they did in the previous 2019 design, and there will be 75% fewer vehicles in the curb lane. The speed tables are meant to reduce vehicle speeds as well as calm traffic. And then the speed tables also discourage people from using Market Street as a through street. As Matt mentioned, trying to communicate that Market Street should be seen as cul-de-sacs or streets where taxis and delivery vehicles would enter a block to make a delivery or drop off a passenger, but again, not to be used as a through street.
Thank you, Christina. Now we will continue with our live public comment with Lauren, followed by Bruce, and then Stacy. Lauren, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi there. My name is Lauren White, and I too am deeply disappointed with the backtracking of the Better Market Street project. I was really optimistic at the beginning of COVID at the prospect of biking from my neighborhood in the Richmond to my place of work in Soma, and using this new slow streets network that all funnels onto Market Street into what is now a big disappointment and a most dangerous street on my commute. I'm a regular biker on Market Street, and I know what it's like to squeeze between delivery trucks on one side and buses on the other. It's not comfortable, it's not safe, and I don't see how this design addresses that. In fact, I think the new raised curb between the transit and taxi lane might make it even more dangerous because it will be hard to escape if a truck comes up next to you. I feel very nervous about the prospect of biking down this 3-block stretch. And I think especially what adds more insult to injury is the fact that we're spending over $120 million on 3 blocks, and we have basically zero improvement for cyclists. Meanwhile, we watch hundreds of millions get spent on other projects for motorists. And I have to mention that this project is just 2 blocks away from where Tess died from a truck. And now we're saying, okay, on our flagship street, we now have to share this lane with trucks. This is not acceptable. What we haven't learned from our past deaths, and we just need to decide if we want our flagship street to be safe for everyone, to usher us into the future and move us towards a more green future, or if we want to keep us in the past and on our upward trend with cyclists and pedestrian deaths in the city. So I'm very passionate that we reevaluate this design. And again, thank you for your work, but I'm not excited at all about biking on this future Market Street design. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Lauren. Next, we have Bruce. Bruce, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So this is not what we were promised. I agree with the previous speakers that this iteration of the design is regressive and not visionary at all. It incorporates many elements, such as sharrows from prior bicycle infrastructure projects that have failed. For example, Polk Street. We could be doing so much more to protect riders of bikes and micromobility and invite new ones. Adding double sharrows and speed tables does nothing to make less able riders feel comfortable riding on a street with mixed traffic. And speed tables are uncomfortable to ride a bike on. Every cyclist I know, myself included, would be willing to accept a narrow cycle track over a wider mixed traffic lane. Those who are comfortable doing so would still be able to ride in mixed traffic. By allowing trucks and loading to access the bikeway, the design violates NACTO's all ages and abilities design guidelines for bikeways and endangers the hundreds of bike riders who rode on Market Street every hour pre-pandemic. It is not worth sacrificing safety to use up expiring federal funds, especially since that appears to be a small portion of the overall funding. I would rather wait to get it right rather than lock in an unsafe design and apply for more federal funding under the incoming Biden administration, which promises to be far more transit friendly than the outgoing federal administration. If the SFMTA chooses to build the substandard design now, but comes up with additional money later, local merchants would be reluctant to have a second period of construction in front of their businesses, and the design would likely be locked in for decades until the next time Market Street is due for repaving. I stand with the Bicycle Coalition, Walk SF, and other safety groups in urging you to go back to the design we were promised last year, which had substantial support from all stakeholders, or a new design that shifts taxis and loading to side streets instead, as other speakers have mentioned. Market Street is the grand boulevard of our city, and it deserves a world-class design that maximizes safety, not a watered-down, half-baked scheme that makes no one happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Now a question from our Q&A chat box. How will traffic enforcement of the new design be enforced to ensure pedestrians and cyclists are safe?
I think the actual enforcement plan is still under development. But Britt, is there anything that you want to add about enforcement?
I would primarily focus on our we're trying to make the street as self-enforcing as possible. And so by adding the speed tables and the mountable curb, it will discourage traffic from going down Market unless they need to go on Market Street for access. We are also looking into other solutions that could discourage traffic, other parts of the corridor. For example, the hub segment, which is west of 8th, would narrow Market Street down to only one lane in each direction. Having that choke point or restriction where only Muni and taxis are allowed to get through that segment between 8th and 12th Street, it would discourage through traffic from using Market Street. And so more of our focus is going on making the design of the roadway self-enforcing so that we're not relying on the police to discourage people from using Market Street, but we do need to do some more work to coordinate with the parking control officers and the police department.
Thank you, Britt. Okay, we'll go back to our raised hands. We have 18 attendees with their hands raised. We kindly ask that you keep your questions or comments to 2 minutes or less. I will read the next 5 names in order in which they can speak. We have Stacy. We have a call-in number, last 3 digits are 740. Danny, Robin, and Eva. Stacy, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So, Better Market, this budget devastation is totally a disaster. The only larger disaster is that it took 10 years to develop and just a few months to disintegrate this plan. But I'm going to look at the bright side. This is actually an opportunity to change San Francisco and Market Street for the better. And it's really easy. The only motor vehicles that should be permitted on Market Street are Muni and emergency vehicles in an emergency. Changing Market Street to cyclists and bike and pedestrians only, no taxis, deliveries, means now you just need retractable bollards to restrict access to the lanes. How will stores get deliveries? Where will taxis drop off? Create loading zones on all of the intersecting streets that are rigidly and actively enforced. Taxis, they're cars. They don't need to access Market. Deliveries, if they don't want to use the loading zones, then they can be done anytime by cargo bike, or if they must be via heavy truck, then it's off hours from say 2 to 5 a.m. Paratransit, they can use pedicab or golf carts, which can safely utilize the bike lane at max speeds of 12 miles per hour, or even the ultra wide sidewalks that we have safely, much like you'd have in an airport. This proposal saves money, creates a better, safer atmosphere for pedestrians and cyclists, and reduces carbon emissions. Sacrificing cyclists for the benefit of taxis and delivery convenience is climate denialism and does not mesh with a transit-first city, which has declared a climate emergency. Just look at what cities like Paris and London are doing and say no to traffic and yes to life. Get motor vehicles off of Market completely and make it best Market Street. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. Okay, now we'll be going to the call-in number, last 3 digits of 740. Please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please make your comment.
Sure. I am furious and my blood boils over this new proposed change. It's as if you haven't even noticed Mother Earth's need for us to respect the laws of nature. I am furious that you are proposing to allow children, young children, to have mixed transit with trucks. That's disgusting. That's very vulgar. I find it personally offensive. And that's also considered entrapment. I'm here to remind you that Vision Zero means 0 deaths in San Francisco. Right now, we're working annually at what? Do you know these statistics? Do you know these people? Did you attend their funerals? About 30 people just this past year. About 600 people go to the ER every year. Motorists are maiming our people, let alone our plant life, our marine life, our bird life. It's unacceptable, these new proposed changes. It's a waste of time. We don't have time for this. We have 11 summers to go. If San Francisco thinks they're so smart, then you need to put active transit mobility first. That needs to be your number one priority. None of this rhetoric. It's absurd. I find it offensive. I also want to echo and amplify all of the work that has been done over a decade. To be talking and having these conversations is ludicrous. It's irresponsible. And again, negligent or incompetent. So take your pick, because this is a combination that we're working with right now. We need you to be smarter, and we can build back safer, and we can build back better. Do it.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Moving on to Danny, who will then be followed by Robin, Eva, and then Shaylin. Danny, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Sauter. I've been a member of this CAC for 5 or 6 years now. I'm on the board of North Beach Neighbors, and up until last week was a candidate for District 3 Supervisor this year. But I'm speaking tonight to oppose these revised plans. This group and so many talented folks have been working for years to deliver a better Market Street that met the goals of being safe, beautiful, and efficient. And this falls short of all of those benchmarks. And it's an insult to the work that the group has put in, that the talented individuals have put in for so many years to arrive to this conclusion, to this final project. I think first and foremost, what you've heard this evening is that we cannot compromise on safety. We've seen cyclist deaths in recent years from box trucks, the types of trucks and vehicles and activity that you're proposing to mix in with bicycles and scooters in these plans. And I know that your intentions with the sharrows and the speed tables are good, but those are marginal. And in fact, there's even been studies recently that show that sharrows are dangerous because they lull cyclists into a false sense of safety. So those are just simply not going to be enough. I do agree that we need wider lanes, but first and foremost, these are lanes that need to be protected. And we have a new budget reality, but we can be creative. We've seen that in the quick builds in our city. We've seen that in the slow streets in our city. We should pursue the same thing here. And we've certainly seen that creative spirit around the world with other cities that have put together bike lanes in mere months to meet this COVID moment. I want that same spirit, that same creativity to shine through in revisions to these plans. I'm really worried that if we go down this compromise path, we're just going to find ourselves stuck with a watered down project. It'll be a project that is too costly to ignore, yet too ineffective to celebrate or feel good about. And I think I speak for many San Franciscans when they're done with that approach. They're tired of that approach. It's too similar to what we've done with the Van Ness BRT. It's too similar to what we've done with the Central Subway. This is a city that wants to be proud of its transit improvements, and it deserves to be proud of its transit improvements. And we have to commit, especially to making sure that comes through on our grandest boulevard of all, Market Street. So thank you for the chance to hear my feedback tonight.
Thank you, Danny. Robin, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi there. My name is Robin, and I appreciate the presentation and also the huge challenge that your project team is facing. Director Tomlin stated that we need a flexible and creative plan that can enable the swelling number of bicyclists we've seen in 2020 to travel down Market Street. And we also need a plan that will be inviting to children, to seniors carrying groceries, and all sorts of real San Franciscans. Your 2020 proposal is none of those things. For people on bikes, it's a worse Market Street, which is what we have right now. It still has some private cars, even though they're illegal. It has big box trucks that force us to slalom around and force us to contend with tripping on Muni tracks. It has taxis, which close past bicyclists, run red lights, and fail to yield to pedestrians. I've seen and survived all of these things regularly. Kids on bikes and seniors riding with groceries are statistically unlikely to survive these things, and they deserve better. To support our local businesses, instead of halting construction, we should move forward with a better Market Street. Countless peer-reviewed studies show that people who ride bikes are more likely to see local businesses as they travel, easily stop at them, and they statistically spend more money at those businesses. Let's make this a safe street to ride on, and then business will improve. As everyone on this call has said, bicyclists must not be forced to share the curb lane with taxis, box trucks, and paratransit. I have 5 ideas that I hope you'll consider. 1, don't upgrade traffic signals. This seems not urgently necessary for a street that theoretically does not carry private cars. This will save millions. 2, go back to the 2019 plan and build that sidewalk level bikeway. 3, allow braver bicyclists to use the Market Street curb lane as they do today. This will increase capacity for bikes since we know that the sidewalk level bikeway is not really wide enough. There is a successful example of a similar setup at the Panhandle right now, where the protected bike path is effectively widened by the adjacent Fell Street bike lane, and now more bicyclists can use those paths. 4, we need PCOs back to enforce the private car-free Market Street. Britt mentioned that Market Street should be self-enforcing, and it currently is not. It still carries plenty of private cars and TNCs. I don't see any solutions to this problem in your 2020 proposal. And 5, only mobility impaired taxi customers should be allowed to use Market Street as drop-off to minimize the number of taxis in the curb lane. I know that SFMTA regulates taxis and for some reason holds them on a pedestal, but unfortunately many of their drivers are maniacs who threaten their lives, and I think they've lost their Market Street privileges. Again, I appreciate the immense challenge that your project team is facing, and we're all upset to be in this position and the budget crunch. But your 2020 proposal doesn't address any of the immense safety hazards that we see on Market today. Share has accomplished nothing and are frankly insulting. Vision Zero is failing miserably, and a proposal like this is exactly why. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for your comment, Robin. Our next speaker is Eva. Eva, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
I'm proud to be a San Franciscan because it's a progressive place that prioritizes people's safety and the environment. I'm a Bay Area native and I've lived in San Francisco for most of my life, and these new plans go against many of the values that we hold as San Franciscans. It doesn't make any sense to me why these decisions were made knowing that it decentralizes cycling and is dangerous and in many cases will be deadly for cyclists and pedestrians. How is this supporting our values as San Franciscans? This is poor city planning, and it brings me deep sadness to think about the lives that were unnecessarily lost by traffic in the past. And I hope that these do not continue to happen with this proposal going through. I stand for a car-free design and not drawing back on safety features, which should be really basic for the city to be protecting its people. We should ban cars on Market Street, except for Muni and emergency vehicles during an emergency only. Please reconsider these plans. At the end of the day, I'm really just so baffled that this project would propose putting cyclists and taxis in the same lane, being regressive to the progress that many have done over the last 10 years, and sacrificing people's safety in favor of emission-emitting motorists, and then call this a better Market Street project. As others have said, this is absolutely a worse Market Street project. I also want to echo everyone else who has spoken up on this call and Also, please know that those of us who have spoken up, we're not alone, but we represent a larger community here in San Francisco as well, and we deserve better.
Thank you, Eva. Going on to our next speaker, we have Shaheen. Shaheen, please prepare to unmute and make your comment. Shaheen has lowered his hand, thank you. Kyle, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, everybody. I really wanted to thank Christina and Soma and the rest of the staff for giving us this presentation. Like a lot of other speakers, I know that times are super hard right now, kind of having to do a lot more with a lot less. But I think it's pretty obvious that this is a much worse design, right? It's pretty hard to see slides saying that our total budget for this project is going to be 128 million, and we're going to end up with a shared bike lane, right? Like with taxis and delivery. Like I bike down Market all the time, and that's the current situation right now. It seems kind of insane to spend that much money to get to basically exactly where we are now. And I know it's tough because nobody really wants to be in this situation, but we know that this is not a good design, and it's insanity that we would continue to go forward with it. So I wanted to thank all of the other speakers before me and all the other speakers behind me. We know that this is not a better design, and we can't continue to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Tim. Tim, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, my name is Tim Hickey, and I have been active with the Market Street discussions for about 10 years. I thought that at the end of our last meetings and with the presentation and the project announcement last year that we had successfully achieved what the vast majority of every speaker and every participant at the meetings had wanted. And yet I know that we have we're in dire straits financially. However, the compromise that was made on this short notice does not incorporate the desires and the demands of all of the participants and the citizens of this city. It does not provide the necessary separation or the safety that was kind of promised to us at that time. There have been some great ideas that have been recommended by previous speakers, and I would strongly encourage that those recommendations be considered, including the removal of the forbidding of all cars on that location, except for, of course, the Muni buses. This is something that I don't want this to be what my child inherits for the street. It is not safe for him to ride on now. It won't be safe for him to ride on in the future as he grows up. So I strongly encourage the engineers who have done, I know, on short timelines and with far fewer resources, they've done what they could. But I think it's very important that the engineers and our decision makers accept what accept what the speakers are asking for and incorporate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Our next speaker is Jay. Jay, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, this is Jay Bain. I'm a Richmond District resident, and I'm on the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee for D1. In my 25 years in San Francisco, I frequently rode up and down Market Street almost every day. And aside from like the condition of the road, the thing that was scariest for me was weaving in between cars and buses, switching lanes back and forth. My questions really are around asking MTA to collaborate with SFPD or whatever city departments are involved to set up automated speed or red light camera enforcement so that cars aren't blocking the box as they try to get down towards the freeway and literally run into people in the crosswalk as they're walking along Market Street. I frequently see private vehicles driving down the red public transit lane on Market Street now, and I haven't heard anything today about how you're really going to effectively get cars to follow the traffic laws on the street in alignment with the new designs that you've put out here. I just want to know what your understanding of the common traffic violations on Market Street are now, how we can improve those, and if you think that it will get any better with this design that you've come up with. I also want to say that I'm a victim of traffic violence. In 1990, I was T-boned by a taxi cab while on the crosswalk of a street in DC. I went up on the windshield of the taxi, into the windshield, down the sidewalk, shattered my tibia and fibia. I had to have an external fixator on my leg for a year. I had to learn how to walk again. Fortunately, I could walk again now and do all of that stuff. But for someone like my 11-year-old or my supervisor elect, who has said that she's too scared to ride this on a bicycle in San Francisco at all, I don't really see a good solution here. Sharrows aren't necessarily going to protect us. So I would also ask that I've asked Director Tumlin before, and also MTA on Twitter and social media, why we can't get an RFI at least for some kind of cargo bike delivery program in San Francisco, like we're seeing in so many other cities, especially for a street like Market Street, where you could have heavy duty cargo bikes delivering instead of these box trucks that are the most dangerous for everybody. So I've never seen an RFI or response from MTA about my request to get a different type of cargo and delivery mode on the street that's compatible with people riding bikes and scooters. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Emily. Again, we want to note that we have 13 speakers with their hands raised. We ask that all speakers be mindful of that, and please keep your comments to under 2 minutes. Emily, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello, my name is Emily Houston. I'm a small business co-owner as well as a journalist who covers safe streets. I'm also someone who bikes and walks as my primary means of transportation. Most of the time, streets aren't designed with car-free folks like me in mind. One would hope that the Better Market Street would buck that trend, but I'm disappointed to say this design is going 10 steps in the wrong direction. I want to urge the SFMTA to reconsider this watered down better design. We've been promised a car-free raised bike lane since the Better Market Street project's conception. The separated infrastructure has been the heart of this project from the beginning. To stray from that is to lose our way and go forward blindfolded from the original vision. Like Paul Valdez said, painted green sharrows won't magically protect anyone from a car collision. Taxis and delivery trucks are not a welcoming or enjoyable environment for the average person who bikes. Protected bike lanes, even if they're a smidge narrower than we'd like, are the best way we can truly make this welcoming for children, seniors, people with disabilities, tourists, and quite frankly, bike-curious folks who won't choose to bike unless it's 110% safe and easy. Mixing bikes with cars will not nudge the average person to take advantage of Better Market Street via bike. As a cyclist, I'll lose all excitement for this project if protected bike lanes aren't a part of the picture going forward. I also want to see real enforcement at intersections to keep private cars off Market Street. Thank you to Jeffrey Tumlin, my personal bike hero, and the whole team at SFMTA who are working hard to realize a truly better Market Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Howard. Howard, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, Howard Wong, founding member of Save Muni. I think it's very important to revisit all the design options with a peer review committee of experts. So one might go back to all the design review boards that have looked at this project over the years, consisting of architects, landscape architects, transit experts, bicycle experts, pedestrian experts. I think you might want to take a look at cities like Copenhagen, Amsterdam, overlay what they've done over the decades with what the plan is and how it's being phased. We want to be sure that we don't have a project that can't be reversed or move in a direction where you have a clear physical separation of all modes of transportation, like in Copenhagen. For Save Muni, transit obviously is our main focus. We do want to see 25% modal share of transit modes of movement be given special attention. because that's the biggest bang for the buck. But at the same time, we need to look at how we might be able to schedule deliveries, like in many cities around the world, differently, or how we may use adjacent streets or perpendicular streets much more efficiently. Mixing of different modes doesn't seem to be logical. And I think there are probably ways of solving that by using the regional street system and sidewalk system, not just the Market Street corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Our next speaker is Jim. Jim, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, I'm 82 years old. I frequently ride Market Street, and honestly, this new plan you come up with seems pretty much what Market Street is now. If the money's all that big a problem, just save it and do nothing more. I think that speed tables are problematical. If you're riding a bike and you're checking everything around, they're exciting to bump, but not exactly safe. I like Stacy, Robin, Kyle, many had ideas, but playing a new version of Frogger, which may not be a reference you understand, but it was an old computer game, but a new version of Frogger with trucks and taxis is not exactly my idea of a safe bike ride. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Going on to our next speaker, we have Watson. Watson, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, my name is Watson Ladd. I'm extremely concerned about this project for a number of reasons. The costs are, first off, ridiculous. We are spending $20 million per mile, sorry, $20 million per block to paint little green squares. This is a fiasco. And it's because you're not being honest about the project. It's not a bike improvement project. It's a sewer and roadway reconstruction project being painted up to look like a bike project. The idea that because there are more bikes, we need to provide worse facilities is perverse. It's a clear sign that the MTA is not addressing its mission of providing bike facilities and considers them an inconvenience. Provide bike facilities that are adequate to the expected volume. It's that simple. And the costs are still ridiculous, even when we consider the infrastructure. There's no attention paid to cost containment. The entire project here needs to be rethought. And when it comes to the bike improvements, if you look at the 2019 plan, it's clearly superior in every way to the 2020 plan. And the costs of implementing the 2019 plan really shouldn't be as much. It's clear that in the future, when you ask voters for more money, they're going to point at these costs and the limited gains and say no. And that needs to be the focus here, is cost containment and better facilities. Do better, seriously.
Thank you, Watson. Moving on to Greg. Greg, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, my name is Greg. I commuted in the city daily before COVID, primarily by bike. I don't own a car. Try to make it a point to get my friends not to drive, not to use Uber, not to use Lyft, have them bike and walk around the city. But it's really dangerous. It's really hard. Sometimes I have to back off because I feel it's just not safe. And this project really reinforces that and the current conditions. I do want to thank the project staff and recognize the challenges faced because of COVID. But I want to echo the previous caller, speakers on the call, that this just doesn't do it. Pharaohs are, in 2020, they're absurd, especially on a street like this. They may have a place, but not on a main thoroughfare. It just doesn't work. Speed tables are not effective. I've almost been, one of the closest calls I've ever had has been on a speed table. I had a motorist come within 2 feet of me on a speed table in Oakland. They just don't do anything. And in regards to taxi drivers and other vehicles that would still share the street, they do not care about people on Market Street. I've seen a taxi driver drive down the 5th Street protected bike lane by posts, floor it in front of me and other cyclists as soon as the light turned green and almost hit somebody. Those are the people who are out on the street. can't rely on their theoretical goodwill to protect everybody who's out there. And yeah, I think the solution is the street needs to be dedicated to through bikes. No taxis, no deliveries. This project needs to be imagined in the future context where cars are not dominant. Trying to imagine it now where cars are still dominant, that's not how you get to a project that works. And a lot of people have mentioned European cities, but we don't need to go that far. Vancouver, a little more than a few hundred miles from here, is an example where there's 50% non-car mode share. They have protected bike lanes. They have traffic diverted bike boulevards with concrete, steel, you cannot drive down them. And they have a good transit network. They have no freeways in the city. And this is right here in North America. And then even now in Fremont, there's sidewalk level protected bike lanes in Fremont and protected intersections, world-class infrastructure right here in the Bay. We didn't need to go far to find out how to build stuff that works for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Sarah, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hello, my name is Sarah Katz-Hyman. I am a San Francisco resident. I'm coming up on 5 years in this city, and I want to smile when I bike, and I don't think I will on the new Market Street plan. Right now, going down Market Street is stressful. I was greatly looking forward to having that stress relieved. I know for my friends who bike, people at SFMTA who bike, the joy of biking is something that is really special to that mode share. And it can only really happen when we have protected and safe infrastructure. I'm also really worried about the change of infrastructure that invites more enforcement onto our streets. Having safe and protected bikeways really starts to eliminate the need for enforcement through policing, and policing in our city and in our country is systematically racist, and I just don't see a reason why we need to engineer a way to add more police. So those are my comments. I really hope that you all dig into the joy of biking and understand that safe biking is happy biking, and that's what we want.
Thank you. Okay, we just want to note the time. It is 5:53 p.m. We have 9 more speakers in the line. We will try to get through everybody as quickly as possible, but please be mindful that if we cannot get to your comment or question, you can email us at bettermarketstreet@sfdpw.org. We will now move on to our next speaker, Sam. Please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is Sam Deutsch. I am a resident of SF. I live in the Noe Valley area and work downtown. And my personal story is actually a few years ago. I was in an unprotected bike lane. I was hit by a truck and I broke my wrist. And to be honest, I was lucky nothing worse happened to me. But since then, I've had a pretty significant fear of biking in mixed traffic and not wanting to, be in an accident with a potentially even worse result. And the first time I actually biked was when Market Street went car free. But I was disappointed when I did that to see that it wasn't actually car free. I was often being pinched in between delivery vehicles and taxis. And while it was better than what it used to be, I'm disappointed that the future plan doesn't solve these safety issues for people who plan on biking. And to be honest, I don't know what the optimal solution is. I'm sure it's a very difficult job, but we need something better, and we need protected bike lanes so that bikes don't get in crashes and people don't get hurt. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Moving on to Fall Scrapper Studio. Please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, everyone. Hey, I'm Alec Hawley, D1 resident and a landscape architect. I've lived in San Francisco on and off for the past 20 years, and used to commute by bicycle on Market constantly. And Yeah, I have to say, unfortunately, the kind of long sought after change, and long fought change of 10 years is really just turned into more of the same. And, now I have two daughters, 7 and a 9-year-old, and all I can think about is trying to bike with them down Market Street. And right now with this plan, it's impossible. And I feel like this for many other families and other people who are not competent cyclers. And the big thing that I know that you're all working towards is trying to get more and more people to choose alternative modes of transit. I know that shouldn't be said, but biking and walking and using transit as opposed to using personal cars. And really, this is going in the opposite direction. You're not going to bring any more people onto market with this, not any people that are afraid that they might get hurt. I myself know multiple people that have been hurt. One of my dear friends who was 60, who just recovered from stroke surgery and was asked to go out and get more exercise, was on his bicycle and was hit on Valencia and shattered his wrist and broke his arm. And I have a friend who is a musician, and he was hit by a car and broke both of his wrists and wasn't able to play for 2 years. If you go forward with this plan, I feel that what you're doing is really endangering cyclists, and we should look to revise this plan and look and think about an 8-year-old and think about an 80-year-old and think about making streets safer, not less safe. And unfortunately, this plan right now is making things less safe. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Moving on to Patrick, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi there. This is Patrick Mortier. I'm a Mission District resident. And first off, I just want to preface and say that, I appreciate a lot of the work that Director Tumlin and the rest of the board has done in working to improve transit in our city. But I've spoken to Director Tumlin in the past, and perhaps in confidence, perhaps not, he made it clear how much he dislikes quote unquote bike Twitter. And frankly, I recognize a lot of people on this call who are passionate not only about cycling, but about Muni and micro-mobility as a whole. And I know Director Tumlin bikes. I know that he has the interests of cyclists at heart. I think what concerns me the most is the fact that Director Tumlin seems completely disconnected about the real concerns that we're sharing today. Okay, he's offered up these public forums as a concession for us to vent and share our real concerns, but I know his mind is made up. And I think he's sitting back right now saying, well, bike Twitter is annoying and rambunctious. Cyclists have gotten enough and they can deal with this compromise. And the truth is we absolutely cannot. All right, I love Market Street, as all of us on the call do. We see the potential of establishing Market Street as a thoroughfare in which both locals and tourists can feel safe and comfortable, either riding a bike, taking a scooter, etc. I've been hit on Market Street on my bike, first by a Muni operator driving a bus who drove an entire block before he realized he'd hit me. And I've been hit by a tourist in a rental car who drove right into the bike lane protected by flexi posts and then tried to drive off immediately after. I was even nearly hit by police officers operating a cop car. And despite the efforts to keep private cars off Market Street, there's still the occasional misguided driver who makes their way onto the street. This amended design is hardly better, right? It makes more of the same. It's more of the same, and it sets us back and apart from more progressive and innovative cities that prioritize the lives of people over cars and private transportation. I don't want to become another Vision Zero statistic. So go back to the drawing board. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. Moving on to our next speaker, identified by Dot. Please prepare to unmute and make your comment. Again, if you're calling in, you can unmute by *6.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a little confusing because if you're using the phone for audio, you have to unmute on the screen and then pick up the phone and unmute them. Okay. Hi, it's David Pilpel. I'm sorry I was so annoyed with the technical issues last time. I had a good follow-up talk with Christina. Second, it looks like most of my comments from last week were addressed, and thank you for doing that. Can you please post today's PowerPoint presentation on the BMS website? It looks like it's a little different from last week's. I'd appreciate that. Thanks. Could you also catalog and post the comments, questions, and responses from this round of outreach on the project website. I talked to Christina about that. She seemed open to the idea. I can probably go to the video. No, I don't see her on the video right now, but she's probably nodding.
I'm here. Yes, we'll post. We posted the presentation from last week. We'll post today's. It's the same except for the times in the agenda and the call-in number.
Okay.
And we are collecting and listing out all the comments. So we'll have frequently asked questions, and then we may have the questions and comments that we're receiving.
Great. Okay. Let me just get through my last few. I found in the story arc thing the proposed street segment designs, but if you could put those three streets into one PDF, maybe comparing the current above and the proposed below for those three blocks, that would be helpful as a way to just compare them without using that slider thing, which is a bit confusing. I'm also looking for clarification on which Muni routes are proposed to stop at the stops, both mid-block and at the corners where they are still proposed to exist, so I can provide some comments on that. I want to reinforce my point from last week that I would like to see a bidirectional F loop. If that's now in phase 2, please design it both ways as a one-directional loop and as a bidirectional loop, so we can perhaps decide later which one to construct if more funding is available. If this design is only for 5th to 8th streets, I hope it will be reviewed and perhaps adjusted before future segments, so this design is not locked in for the rest of the street. I commented before that I would like mailed notice in the future. I don't use email, and not everyone uses email, and the Zoom thing still required an email today. And if I have more comments and questions, I will contact Christina, Coma, Peter, Britt, or Mariana. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. We will extend the Q&A for just a few more minutes and take the remaining people on with their hands raised. So please be mindful and keep questions and comments to 1 to 2 minutes. Harold, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Okay. By now, you should all realize the biggest problem is that vehicles are sharing the lane with bikes. That shouldn't have been a consideration at all in the first place. Some real wishful thinking on your part. Jeff Tomlin says, slowly moving taxi cab. Like, has anybody ever really seen that? And we're talking all these language about discouraging drivers. You got to stop them with barriers. You got to keep drivers off and keep the number of vehicles that are using Market Street to a bare minimum. 0 would be the best number. And those few that are using the street should be using the transit lane. Bicycles shouldn't be sharing the lane at all with trucks and taxi cabs and whatever else you think ought to be there. It doesn't need to be there. And then the other thing that hasn't been brought up at all is that keeping vehicles down helps pedestrians. The intersections and the crosswalks are very dangerous for pedestrians, and the more vehicles you have, more dangerous it is for pedestrians. So keep the vehicle number down, very low, preferably 0, and have them use the transit lane. Keep the bike lanes clear for bicycles. And I wrote more in my email to you, but I just wanted to say it in person as well. So you can move on to the next caller.
Thank you, Harold. Moving on to our next caller. Last 3 digits of the phone number is 080. Please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Yes, my name is Pyra. I work for Senior and Disability Action. More importantly, I worked 15 years for paratransit. And I just want to make a little comment or make things more complicated. I'm hearing a lot of things about taxi, and I'm not going to comment on their driving behavior, but taxi is part of paratransit. They are required by law to provide paratransit services. And over 50% of paratransit members use paratransit. So the design has to be to accommodate taxis. Maybe this is not the right way, but it's an ADA law. It has to be there. And I'm not promoting because I'm not a taxi driver. In fact, I'm a disabled bicyclist who rode over 40 years, most of it in San Francisco. So the design, I have to just do this as education. Design has to incorporate taxis and paratransit vehicles. It is required as an ADA requirement. So please, when you make your comments, think about people with disabilities and seniors, because a lot of the designated bike lanes make it even more difficult for people with disabilities and seniors. So we ain't quite there yet, but you do have to incorporate taxis and paratransit vehicles onto Market Street. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Pyra. Moving on to Chloe. Chloe, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Chloe Reverie. I live in Inner Sunset. I'll try to keep this brief. I use Market Street to get to work downtown, and I've never been involved in bike advocacy before, but I felt that I had to add my voice here to try to represent some more casual riders who often don't find out about these open houses or don't realize that they can pop in and speak their mind. I appreciate all of the work that's gone into this project, but I'm so bitterly disappointed to hear that this plan is being watered down. We have a plan that will save lives. 10 years have been spent developing a path-breaking vision for micromobility and transit in San Francisco. And we're throwing it away. And with barely any notice to the people who could benefit from the plan, like me, who haven't been involved in the years of planning around this and don't know what's happening. We need protected, dedicated bike lanes throughout Market Street. It's not enough to reduce vehicles by 75% if there are still vehicles like taxis and trucks that we already know don't work on Market Street without protected and dedicated bike lanes. So please, as someone said before, I hope that you can go back to the drawing board, because we can't settle for this plan. It's not the Vision Zero that we were promised and that I know that we can achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. And our final question, raise hands for this evening's meeting, is Aaliyah. Aaliyah, please prepare to unmute and make your comment.
Hi, and thank you so much. And first of all, I appreciate everyone's work around this, the team and the director and the few people that came to share their thoughts. And I've been living here for 6 years. I went to community college here. I went to school in the East Bay and I came back. And I've heard about this plan for quite some time. And it just struck me with a bunch of hope, as if this is the city that I chose to live in, the city that does things right, the city that leads with example. And seeing what goes on here just shatters my heart. I cannot express. I was like hit by a car in the past, and I've seen what's going on in Valencia Street and how it flourishes and how people are starting to come to that street because of the protected bike lanes. And I just am trying to figure out why the committee and this team would choose to change the plans. And it's just a matter of set of priorities to me. And essentially there's some kind of interest coming in that is unclear to us for why this decision is being made. Because cyclists and urban planners would have never put cars and bikes in the same lane, not in this era. This is outdated and this should be addressed. And while this might seem as the end, and this is painful, we will continue to fight and we will continue to share our voices and opinions about this, and we will change things. And just like think about yourself if you want to be on this side of history, about the people that made the plan to spend public money on a wrong plan that is just gonna put people's life at risk. Thank you for letting me share my opinion, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Aaliyah. With that, we see no more hands. Christina?
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We will be finishing the public comment tomorrow at the Transportation Authority Board, which is the Board of Supervisors, at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, November 10th. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we've extended our virtual open house until November 30th. So you can find this presentation as well as additional project materials on our website, bettermarketstreetsf.org. We'll be adding a survey. So if you didn't get a chance to speak tonight, you can fill out the survey and also provide comments via our email. And I think you can see our website on the page on the slide right now. Our email is bettermarketstreet@sfdpw.org. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.